Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it's been actually like 2 weeks since I put one of these out, and it's not because I haven't recorded one. I've had various kinds of clusterfucks happen with the recordings of these, but this was by far the worst. The video, I don't know what happened. Looks like there was Vaseline on the lens. It's like you can't see anything. It's just a blur. The audio, well, the audio in the camera, always terrible. The audio in the computer from my lavalier mic didn't work out. It was just static, pure static. I don't know what the fuck. So annoyingly, I was actually really proud of that one, and Gil actually said he really liked the abuse one, which was a couple weeks ago. This one I think was even better than that. It was basically on the Gravel Institute. They have this thing that they're working on, which is kind of a counter programming to PragerU. PragerU, if you don't know it, is this horrible, just bullshitty, right-wing, basically propaganda kind of crap. It's just, the thing that's terrible about it is that it's all presented in this kind of almost professorial manner, which, yeah, is good in the sense that you're maybe learning something and people feel like they're learning something from it. I think people are thirsty for knowledge and they go there. But it's also bad because when you have, like this Dennis Prager guy, kind of looks like vaguely like a certain kind of professor anyway, acts like it, talks like it, and that authority, that sort of gravitas, infers a certain amount of, in his case, I would say, very badly unearned respect and trust. And so people will watch this shit, and it kind of, makes you think things that are just not even true. And they also have an interesting thing where they kind of boil the frog a bit. They have some things where they're like not that far from reality. You start watching those, and then you kind of go a little bit further, you ratchet up, and the next thing you know, Adam Carolla is telling you something about, I don't know, just how it's totally cool to be prejudiced. And I mean, I'm being pithy and joking, but not that much. It's just a lot of bad shit. So this Gravel Institute is putting out these videos. I highly recommend them. They're pretty awesome. And the one that I was talking about in the previous one of these that I recorded, which was actually the day that it came out. So if you can, today is the 20th of October, 2020. This came out the day that the Gravel, or I recorded it rather, the day that the Gravel Institute did this one on essentially capitalism and free markets, the illusion of freedom. And this is something that I'm a huge, I don't want to say fan of, but it's something I talk about all the time. It's something I think about all the time. It bugs me terribly. People have this basically religious, almost fetishistic idea that free markets, or I shouldn't say free markets, but that markets, A, are free, they give you some kind of choice, and that B, they give you the best, cheapest, the best thing for the lowest price, essentially. In reality, what is happening, and what has been happening, is that you don't really have much freedom. And this video did a much better job of talking about that than I will. So I'd refer you to that. But it's interesting because it's like, the first sunglasses I ever got were Oakleys. I was in a bike shop, I saw them, I thought they looked cool. Put them on, and the optics were like, fuck, what the, I mean, it was like bigger than your naked eyes. And they looked decent at the time. And since then, I got so many pairs of Oakleys. They're not cheap, but I got them, and I'd wear them for a couple years, and then, usually what would happen is the lenses would scratch. The frames were built, fucking solidly. And I'd get middle ones when they came out with them, And they were just, like you could step on the frames and, they're fine. So then there's this horrible company called Luxottica. And Luxottica's thing is basically that they find little niche, glasses brands, and they acquire them. They don't really acquire the products and the lines, they acquire the name, really. And then, kind of like generally the style. And then they crapify them. They figure out how to make something that looks like an Oakley, but it's, some cheap CNC milled, like Chinese pot metal, garbage. And, the last pair of Oakleys I ever got, I bought it, it looked pretty decent. It was like a middle frame thing, looked cool. It was almost, before this I had one I think called Romeo or Juliet, I don't know. They were this exotic kind of metallic alloy, fucking cool shit. Nice material, great optics. And I get this last pair again, and they looked, again, similar. Felt a little light, they were aluminum. But I got them, I wore them for like probably 4 months, 5 months, and the fucking, I think it's called the stem, just cracked. Middle stem on the glasses cracks. Company turned to garbage. I didn't know at the time Luxottica bought them, although in retrospect it's obvious. Now, they still make Oakleys, and there's still a thing, but when you see how they're made, when you see what they are doing, they're just crapified. But the cool thing is, you still get to pay the same price that you were paying when they were the company that they were. And this is really what capitalism, for the most part, is giving us today. There's a company called Fluke. You might not have heard of them, but they make multimeters. They make all kinds of really good test equipment. They were the de facto standard for this kind of stuff for years and years. And they got acquired by some other company. And that company basically, this is the pattern, sort of milk the brand. They cost down the devices. They're not like making garbage exactly, but they slow down the R&D a lot. You start making cheaper products, less expensive products, and eventually crappier products. And yet you keep the same price because you got the name. And worse than this also, the people running these companies are these finance guys, and they cared more about big salaries and getting bonuses than anything. They don't really care about the long-term future viability of the company. So what they end up doing, often, and in this case, is they start taking out giant fucking loans, or the equivalent thereof. So, they'll borrow tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars sometimes, squeeze as much as they can out of the company, but also squeeze out even the potential for cash in this sense. And then, you get a bonus check because you hit the quarterly target or you beat it. You get some nice equity, you cash out, you get the fuck out of there. And then the company just is a shambles, a hollow shell of its former self. But what do you care? Because you got your nice house and your yacht and all of your cool stuff. This is the thing. It's, whether you're talking about Pharma Boy, Shrekky, whatever the fuck that asshole's name was, the stuff that he was doing was no different. If you look basically at any pharmaceutical company, any major pharmaceutical company, they did the same shit. Cut down on R&D significantly, buy patents on drugs that had been well established, start taking those things, ratchet up the price, cost down the production. So costs less to make, and you're charging more and more, and basically kind of ratcheting it up to find how much pain people are willing to tolerate. And then, you're just extruding as much. You're taking that toothpaste tube of your customers and just squeezing out every last drop and just like twisting it and scraping it and doing everything you can to get any fucking change that they have. And this is how business works today for the most part. It's not business as I see business. I mean, to me, business is, I have an idea for a product. I spend some time making it, more time than you expect by a significant margin. But you spend some time, you spend some money, you make the thing, you sell it at a fair price, and people buy it, enjoy it, and you kind of delight them with things. And then you just keep going. You use that to make more cool shit. That's how it should go, right? You get to make a nice living, they get to have nice products. And instead of this, what we get mostly is just crap. You just get crap. And you get people talking about how much free markets are awesome. And in reality, you have no fucking choice. If you go out today and you want to buy sunglasses, there are companies out there that are not Luxottica. But if you don't make a special effort to buy something that's not Luxottica, you're not even going to know you're doing it and you're buying Luxottica. This is what the fuck they do. In terms of ISPs, I have Cox Cable, which sucks. There's CenturyLink here, which sucks. They're both basically the same price. I think CenturyLink's a little bit cheaper, but sucks in different ways. And it's not quite collusion. It's not quite like a cartel. But you have this thing where even when you do have several companies, which are ostensibly competitors, there's no real competition. If you're getting a mobile phone, you have T-Mobile, you have Verizon, you have Sprint, and a lot of these companies kind of acquire other ones, so it's fewer choices than it even appears, and certainly than it used to be. But when you look at the prices, they're all high. And it's not because that's just like the barest minimum of what they could drive it down to. There's a company, I've talked about this before, but in France, there's something called Free. You can go free.fr. They have, for 20 euros a month, unlimited voice, unlimited data, unlimited text, mobile phone. And you can call like 150 countries like it's a local call. You can roam around Europe, use your fucking phone, like it's just going to a different state. It's no big deal. It's fucking awesome. And even if you have to pay roaming fees and this kind of stuff, relatively cheap. T-Mobile, my company, has international stuff, but it's ridiculously expensive, it's super inconvenient, and it's crappy. It's amazing how different the two things are. And it's not like T-Mobile is special there. You go to AT&T, you get the same shit. You go to Verizon, you get the same shit. It's just kind of the way things are. And this is really one of the things, it's this illusion of choice. It's this idea that you have, this marketplace of stuff where you can pick, and while you're picking, you're getting the best thing, you're driving down the costs, people are giving you the best product because they feel competition. This is not how it works. It's not how it works at all. Instead, you have Luxottica making practically everything and turning it all to shit. And you're basically fucked. You have Amazon basically dominating all of the retail markets, killing any kind of local stores, killing non-local store, any kind of online stuff gets absorbed, and it just all turns to the same shit. And not only that, you have something where once thousands of companies flourished and provided, decent livings for lots of people, nice, like careers for people who would have, I hate the word mom and pop shop, but they would have their own little family business. They'd pay for themselves a nice house, a nice life. They could pay to have their kids go to college, which incidentally should be free, but never mind that now. I could do a whole fucking talk on that one, by the way, but getting back to this. All that shit, now, instead of going to thousands of families and giving thousands of people that kind of stuff, it's all going to fucking Jeff Bezos's pockets. It's not good. There's no way you can look at this and think, this is the way it should be. This is great. This is awesome. Fuck this shit. This is bullshit. And I'll tell you, it's the same thing that I complain about in politics. Now, I want to be clear, and I'm not going to get too deeply into politics because I'm sick of it. I'm sure you're sick of it. But I always try to be clear. The Democrats and the Republicans are not the same. They are definitely not the same. The Democrats are sort of right of center, at least in the way they govern and the ones that are elected and dominating the party. And then the Republicans are like ridiculously crazy, far right, anarcho-capitalists. You know, just market fetishists, think everything should just be completely free, laissez-faire capitalism, the stuff that we have today, the awesome kind of shit. These are the people who, like the Tories, do this game where they take some kind of public service and like national, National Health Service for UK. And they take this thing, they underfund it, they kind of, hamstring it, make it suck, convince people that it sucks because it's run by government, and then pull it out into private hands and basically pilfer taxpayer dollars and turn it even into more crap. So it just, it's such a fucked up thing. And it happens again and again and again, and people keep seeing this and they never fucking learn. It's such an obvious thing. Nobody makes the case. So again, the parties are not the same. But the choice is there. I can choose, just looking at the presidential election. I could vote for Biden, as I did grudgingly, or, well, there's zero chance that I would ever vote for Trump. There's an argument to be made that if you want your voice to be heard, you could say, I'm gonna either vote for the guy that I want, or I will not only not vote for the guy that you insist, but I will vote against him. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna play that game. I'm not, maybe I'm just not that rational, but Trump is fucking terrible, right? But Biden, also pretty fucking bad. And these are our choices. I can get fake Oakleys, or you can get any of, I don't even know how many brands they have, but probably like 100+ brands. And they're all fucking Luxottica. And they're all made as cheaply as possible. And so this is, anyway, getting back to this. This was all what I talked about. It was much longer than that. Was probably, a little bit more raw, but annoyingly lost it. Poof, gone. So hopefully today's will not be, in such disrepair. Now, I had something I wanted to talk about today, which I think I'm going to hold off on, but just as a preview, I'll spare you that. I'll put those out later. It's an interesting thing about this that just kind of the nature of how I work and how I think. It's very difficult for me to actually have, even with a one-word prompt, it's difficult to stay on it. And so one thing that I do want to work on, and I'm still not really trying to make this something where I'm really like building an audience. I'm more like, just getting a little, lifting weights, basically. Not for a particular reason necessarily, but just kind of getting a little stronger, getting a little better. One thing I really want to work on is being tighter. And by that, I don't mean that I want to make this something that is 5 minutes and, like bang, bang, bang. But I do want, the content to be a little bit better flowing, a little bit, maybe a little bit punchier, I don't know, but more interesting, more entertaining, and also a little bit denser. So it's not that the whole thing will be short, although sometimes they may be, but I want them to be, like if you have 20 minutes of my normal tangents, I want that to be like 10 minutes, kind of condensed a little bit. And so if I have 20 minutes of the new, or what I'm working toward, it's much, meatier. There's much more there. So I'm gonna declaring that I'm working on this as not as a talk about it in lieu of doing it, but just sort of to kind of throw my hat over the wall and go for it. So with that, I think you have no way of knowing this. It's 10:30 at night. I normally try to get to bed by now, but I was wide awake and I was thinking about this. And yeah, there just a lot of things. But I don't know. I'm so annoyed with a lot, just so many things. Like the stuff with politics, this thing with the market stuff and all of this. This will be the last thing that I talk about, but came up today. All of these startups. So again, business is not really being businesses. You have, and the reason this came up is actually in California, back to elections, there's something called Prop 22. And Prop 22 is this bullshit thing that Uber and Lyft and a lot of these companies have put together to basically kind of make themselves exempt from labor laws. But they frame it in a great way that sounds, oh, it's great. It's great for the drivers. They get drivers to make these commercials. And the thing is, you watch the commercial, it sounds great. You don't think about it and you're kind of like, how do the drivers have the money to pay for this? Well, they don't. But Uber and Lyft and similar companies are paying like hundreds of millions of dollars to push this fucking thing through, which should ring some fucking alarm bells for you. So the thing about it, and the thing about these companies, is they don't run as companies. And this is not just, they're not anomalies. This is how startups, for the most part, work. Uber and Lyft, and more generally, a lot of these companies, basically have something, these scooter companies I particularly hate, but they're in there. But a lot of startups, kind of like a default startup, it's almost like a investor Ponzi scheme. So you have this idea, kind of put it together in enough of a shiny package that someone puts some money in it. And you get some customers, you get some traction, you get some stuff, it feels like things are happening. And then you start talking people into putting more money in. And now you build this thing that's not really running as a business because you're operating at a huge loss. Uber was at $1 billion a quarter, like losing $1 billion a quarter, as big as Uber is. I don't know where they stand now, but they're probably about there. I should look. I haven't looked in a while. I can't stand the company, so I kind of like keep my eyes away. But they were spending that much money, and when I say spending, I mean losing. Spending much more, but losing that much. And they tell the investors this big fucking lie that like, oh well, we're spending this money to expand and to do all these things, and then one day they tell this fairy tale. One day we will get, and this is a fucked up thing too, by the way, but one day we'll have monopoly power. We'll just drive all of the competition out, and then we can set our own prices, and then magically we will turn on profitability. This comes also from, if you know Peter Thiel. If you don't know Peter Thiel, he's a fucking huge asshole. If you do know Peter Thiel, he's a fucking huge asshole. But this guy, first major investor in Facebook, huge fucking asshole. This guy has a book called 0 to 1. And in the book, not a terrible book, but he talks about having, like a monopoly. And his whole goal is to have monopolies. And, he's kind of like, well, you carve out a niche and then you get a monopoly in there and you can expand. And, he frames it in a way that actually doesn't sound bad. It's kind of actually like the PragerU thing in a weird way. It sounds good. And then you think about it, there's, it's not quite so good. But on the surface, if you don't really think about it too much and you don't know too much, hey, it's actually not a bad thing. So, he talks about this. This is what people push. Got to get a monopoly. Rather than having, like decent businesses, and people in startup land call this kind of thing a lifestyle business, where you have a business and, you can actually have a life and you make enough money to be comfortable. You make enough, the kind of businesses, those mom and pop things that I was talking about, they would call those lifestyle businesses in a very derisive way. And they would just kind of, look down on them. And I'm not saying that necessarily that should be the limit of your ambitions. Your ambitions could be as big as you want. But the idea that you would take something where formerly all these businesses were there and you're now going to funnel all that shit into your own pockets and fuck everybody else, it's not a great thing. The idea that you're somehow going to get a monopoly, by undercutting everybody, and then driving them out of business. Not a good thing, even if it would work. And the thing about that fairy tale with Uber and Lyft and all these other companies, all the fucking scooter companies you see littering our streets, the thing about these is that the barrier to entry is so low that it's not possible, in principle even, to get a monopoly. So yeah, there's just no way you can do it. And the other thing about Uber and Lyft, they have this fairy tale that they also tell the investors. Oh, well, one day, now our expenses are pretty high, but one day we'll have autonomous cars and they will eliminate our drivers' expenses. And yeah, that sounds, it sounds evil and terrible, but it sounds plausible enough until you think the drivers are fronting the fucking CapEx, the capital expenditures for the companies. Uber and Lyft do not pay for the cars, they do not pay for the fuel, or at least not directly. The drivers pay for these things. They don't pay for the maintenance, they don't pay for any of this shit. And so, when you have a driver, that driver is actually bringing in potentially thousands or tens of thousands of dollars worth of something that they're bringing onto the table, and they are giving you Uber or Lyft for free, essentially. And they're actually depreciating the value of that because they're driving it more. So they're losing money in addition to handing you this big gift. So Uber and Lyft, imagine that they magically tomorrow come up with fully autonomous vehicles that can go on, not just on freeways, but on city surface streets, no matter what, anywhere, anytime. Imagine they do it. Poof. You know how much those things cost? Even if they're fucking cheap, tens, 20s of thousands of dollars would be cheap. They're buying Teslas, say, Model S, cheap one, relatively cheap one, 70, 80,000. Model 3, you drive the price down, maybe it's in the 40s, I don't know, but it's expensive. And they're now having to pay for this. So it's not like they're eliminating the driver, they're now adding the CapEx. So, now you could say, well, the lifetime value of the driver, lifetime cost of the driver, it doesn't actually cancel out the CapEx that the drivers bring in. That's the fucking problem. So they're not businesses. They're just phantoms. They're figments. It's crazy given how popular these things are. But that's the thing. They're just, sound and fury and advertising and fluff and hype and bullshit. And one day, God willing, no, I'm not a religious person, but though, I like the saying sometimes. One day, hopefully, these things will implode. And people will go like, who could have known? Uber was such a big company. Everybody knew Uber. How could they have imploded? It's not that surprising. And this is one of the reasons why, if you're in California, vote the fuck against Prop 22. Not that it will save these companies, by the way. If you're like, oh, I want Prop 22 to save them, it won't save them. It won't save them. That's the thing. These are just fundamentally bad businesses. If they were charging what it actually costs to do what they're doing, people would find it prohibitively expensive. Because it's subsidized, people are like, $5 for, $15 for a distance. That's, fuck it, I'll do it. It's fucked up. It's a scam. And the thing about it is, it's not just a scam where these guys are enriching themselves, but it's a scam where these motherfuckers are essentially stealing from potential, public transportation, for example. Like Elon Musk's Boring Company. We're going to put Teslas in tunnels. Almost a train, except instead of having a train, where you have a bunch of cars and a bunch of people, and you have individual cars and turbulence and extra. It's like, it's not a great plan. It's like a shitty subway, basically, a shitty private, capitalistic, masturbatory subway. It just irritates me. So anyway, and again, imagine that Uber killed Lyft. They did it. Barrier to entry, so cheap, and also you have so many companies getting into this stuff. You can't kill all the competition. Even if you killed the competition, you drive up the prices. Now there's new competition because the prices justify new competition. And now you lose your monopoly. It's why these businesses don't work. Well, I mean, they work in the sense that they're, again, like an investor scam. These fucking scooters, all of these things are just hot air. Shit tons of money go in and subsidize these things, and then they sell them. They give them away basically for a big discount relative to what it would actually cost to use and to produce all this stuff. And it irritates me. And then you get cities conned into this shit, where there are cities that are putting money into these kinds of things instead of actually investing in public transportation, which is, hard infrastructure that will actually pay dividends long into the future and won't go up in smoke. So anyway, thank you very much for that. I'm gonna take off and wrap this up and try to get to sleep, at least for a few hours. I have chronic insomnia, so it probably won't be very long, but enough to feel somewhat rested. As always, thank you for listening. Thanks for watching, and 再见。